Seems like it never ends. It will be done soon. It's me, Bob Harris, senior editor of FootballDiehards.com, and Emil Kadlec, the chief cook and bottle washer here at FootballDiehards.com. It's the Bob and Emil show. As thing we like to do every Friday night, kind of just talk about some of the current goings-on around the NFL that have a fantasy interest to us. And I think this week, there's some news, of course, and a lot of it is kind of creating opportunities. And I think the big stories that we're looking at this week, we have in San Francisco, Matt Breida's been ruled out for this week's game, along with Pierre Garçon again, so that's kind of become the norm. But in LA, we've got no Melvin Gordon. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, we have no James Conner. For the Denver Broncos, we have no Emmanuel Sanders. And there's been some changes and some shifts in Buffalo that we'll touch on as well. A couple things, before we get rolling too deep here. In Baltimore, there's been a lot of talk about Joe Flacco today. He's listed as questionable. Some concerns that I've been hearing as we did the Sirius show, Mike Dempsey and I tonight, the Football Diehards show. People worried that maybe Flacco will get some looks. I don't think he will. I don't think he's been medically cleared yet. But game script could, and that's always the case, right? If a game is going crushingly wrong, you never know what's going to happen. And that's kind of why we play this game, because you can't predict with 100% accuracy in advance. But it does look like Lamar Jackson. I think the problem with that game could be game script if the Chiefs get up, but it's a good defense. So interesting game, that Chiefs-Baltimore contest, I think, and we'll see what happens there. But let's dig in. Emil, are you ready?
Ready to go. We got a nice list here.
Yeah, let's look at these. Start out with the Chargers. And I think that it's of the greatest interest to fantasy owners because it's the most amazing matchup, right? We have an over-under of, I think it's up in the 47.5 points. But what makes that interesting is the Chargers have an implied total of 30-plus points, leaving the Bengals not scoring very much. So a lot of points for the Chargers. And what we're looking at here is a pair of running backs in Austin Eckler, the likely starter, and Justin Jackson, a guy who was very impressive as the game went on in Pittsburgh last week. So I guess some of the initial thoughts, I think Austin Eckler remains the starter in this one. He is the better receiver that we know of because we haven't seen much of Justin Jackson doing that. We have seen him carry the ball and carry it effectively. So as you look at this game, Emil, is game script going to be something that becomes a factor in this?
It could very well be. Justin Jackson looked pretty good last week. He did get 8 carries, 63 yards, and a touchdown, and he made that really nice move around the 5-yard line that really showed he had some talent. And yeah, I mean, you certainly are in a situation where if LA gets up big, maybe they put Jackson in a little bit just to see him more. And maybe the other way, like you said, if they're behind, and Eckler had I think it was eight targets last week. He's, like you said, he's a proven pass catching back. Let's see, Justin had one target, 1 catch for 19. So you're right. If the Chargers are behind, maybe Eckler stays in the game more.
Yeah, and the Chargers aren't. I mean, they're obviously the big favorites, have the big implied total. So my feeling is if you wanted to play, if you're trying to decide between these two, and I think you could play either or, to be honest with you. They're both decent prices in DFS this week. But if you're in an either or situation, I think I would look at the that implied total and assume the Chargers are going to be up big in the second half and probably running the ball, looking to grind the clock. And I mentioned the drafting prices. I think we have the thing about Justin Jackson is he's 3,800 and 4,500 DraftKings and FanDuel, slightly cheaper than Eckler. So I do like both plays, but that's the thing for me. It just seems like this could be a game where we see the Chargers really just get out big in front of them and just want to milk the clock in the second half. It reminds me as well of something Matt Waldman, our friend from the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, wrote about Jackson. We saw that last night with that Derrick Henry character. Apparently the stiff arm is a thing. And I remember Waldman saying about Justin Jackson, his stiff arm is kind of very similar to that of the Heisman trophies. He's got a good stiff arm. Good physical runner, big body, and I think all those things work. Also wondering that game we saw last week against Pittsburgh, Keenan Allen being Keenan Allen. 2 things about this passing attack. Phillip Rivers is a soulless machine who will carve you into tiny pieces. I love watching him play. He's very competitive, a great trash talker without swearing. which, as you know, when we speak off air, I am incapable of doing. I must swear every other word. So when I watch someone talk trash like Phillip Rivers without swearing, I'm always impressed. But, some of that last
I didn't know you could.
You see me there. This is the only time the switch goes on and the swearing stops. We saw Keenan Allen, and some of that seemed to be the coverages, right? Pittsburgh seemed to be putting linebackers on him a fair amount. I mean, they just didn't have his number. What are your expectations for Keenan Allen in this game?
Wow. He should do well. I mean, you can't. 19 targets, 14 catches. What was it? 148 yards, a touchdown. You can't expect something that big, but I think he's obviously the play for you. If you've got him, you're going to play him.
Right.
He's been a little. Go ahead.
We kind of drafted him to be the guy we saw last week. So, I'm hoping for a little more coming on that PPR machine.
Yeah.
And I think he's capable of that. If you remember last year, it was down the stretch when he really started to assert himself. And so I'm hoping for the same. But on the running back front, I think we both kind of agree that Jackson is the guy if you want to, maybe cash in on the game script. I don't think it precludes you from playing Eckler. Again, this is the Bengals. They are playing defense like few do, and by that I mean they are playing it horribly. And we should just say, I was talking about this with someone the other night, and I would get your opinion on this. NFL defenses anymore, we look at the scoring, and we talk about this every week, how fantastic the scoring is in the NFL this year. So many shootouts, so many close games. We've seen a few weeks with the lower scores, but for the most part, we're getting a lot of shootouts like we want. And it seems like defense, and it started dawning on me when I watched that Chiefs-Rams game, the Monday night, week 11, is defense is an evolving thing just like offense. Offenses are getting better, but defenses are turning into not so much, shut down units because it's hard to shut anybody down. They're turning into playmaking units where if you can get your defense to score a touchdown or two, that's what's making the difference in games. For the Bears, for the Rams, we saw it in that game against the Chiefs. That was the difference, was their defense. Yeah. And so I think that's what kind of defense is turning into. And again, plays into the hands of fantasy owners because not only are the offenses scoring more and the defense is struggling to stop them, but those playmaking defenses are coming up with big plays and scoring as well. So I think we win in the end
Absolutely.
in all the ways. All right, let's look at the San Francisco 49ers because I think this is the guy that interests me the most for one reason. Jeffrey Wilson Jr., we saw him come in, had a great game last week with Matt Breida got hurt in the pregame warmups. Alfred Morris, a pregame scratch, a healthy scratch. I have a little lingering doubts about him. But talk a little bit about his workload, Emil, and what you thought of how he looked to you.
I thought it looked great. I was, surprised. He definitely got, 15 carries, 61 yards, over 4 yards a carry. I don't have I forgot to print out his receptions, but
I think he had a number of catches. He was actually more effective as a receiver, or is equally at least as effective as a receiver. So
I'll pull that up real quick here. But keep going, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing for me is the clearest path to workload. And look, I'm going to go ahead and assume that we get back, that we have Alfred Morris is at least active, right? And that'd be fine. I could deal with that. But I think this guy, he comes in, and I think Mike Clay had him on the Football Diehards show yesterday. He co-hosted with us from ESPN, and he made a really good point. Is it kind of reminds him of Gus Edwards coming on in Baltimore 2 weeks ago, except Wilson can catch the ball. He has a role in the passing attack.
Yeah, look at the numbers here from last week. It was 9 targets, 8 catches, 73 yards.
Right.
I mean, that just makes him, you love the multi-back like Gordon, where if they have to pass, he's still in the game. If they're going to run, he's still in the game. So you don't have to worry about game script, quote unquote, messing with you. Those are some great. So he's
and in this game, look, it could go different ways. And there's other guys in this.
Well, they are playing against Denver. So that doesn't help in this week. Go ahead.
So he, look, if they're shutting down the run, he can be part of the passing attack. I think it's good for the Broncos, or good for the 49ers. The Broncos will be without Chris Harris Jr. and a guy that we'll also talk about here, Dante Pettis, who also coming off a big game, 5 catches, 129 yards, had the 2 touchdowns. Look, you should not expect that every week. But it's solid. George Kittle looks like a solid play in this game as well, coming off a 6-catch, 70-yard game. And the good news, no Pierre Garçon again. So we have no Garçon, no Breida the Cheetah so clear path for Wilson, still somewhat clear path for Dante Pettis, but Marquise Goodwin's coming back.
Yeah.
And so here's my thought on that, though. That actually works in everyone's favor because I think Marquise Goodwin keeps the attention of a safety. With that speed, that Olympic level speed, he's legitimately one of the fastest guys on the field. He draws extra attention. That helps Pettis out, who is already good again working out of the slot without Chris Harris Jr. And it helps Wilson out by keeping the safeties occupied and making it more difficult for them to focus on and put more men in the box.
That's excellent analysis. I like that. And it's just a little scary because Pettis kind of disappeared for a while, and then he comes out and plays a career game. Fantastic. Imagine if you were playing in a tournament DFS last week, and you had Zay Jones, who didn't catch a ball the week before, scores 2 touchdowns, and you put Pettis in also, who scores 2 touchdowns and has an insane amount. Wouldn't that be great? Looking back one week.
The over-under in this game is 44.5, implied total for Denver, slightly higher, 25 points, 19 for San Francisco. So, I mean, look, reasonable production expected by Vegas for both teams. I think that works in my favor. But I guess for me, of all these guys coming in, and we're going to talk about in Pittsburgh, Jalen Samuel coming in, and we just talked about the situation in Los Angeles. For me, assuming there is not a Alfred Morris surprise, and look, it's Kyle Shanahan. We've all had our asses Shanahaned to us many times over the courses of our fantasy lives by Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan. Look, Raheem Mostert, a few weeks back against Green Bay. Who saw that coming? We just, they will catch you out of the blue with these situations at times. But I do think Wilson is primed, and your confidence levels in him.
Oh, I like it. I think it's a great opportunity. I don't think he'll pull any punches here and do some Shanahans to us. I think Wilson's a nice start. Now, I think Brad Cruz, our sit-start guy, puts sit on Wilson, if I recall, or maybe it was somebody else. Let me flip to that real quick. I have one other. He had sit for Jeff Wilson. I'm going to disagree with him on this, especially with the pass catching ability of Jeff Wilson. One other question for you, Bob. Breida, is he going to be? What's the status of him in week 15 and 16, or do we not know?
I think he will be back. Look, he's been pretty resilient, right? I mean, and that's the thing. They carry him off, and he comes back on. He's kind of like Elvis at the end of his show, or he keeps coming back, or James Brown. I'm sorry, he's coming back like he can't be dead, and that's what we've seen with Breida in the past. This time it was the ankle that caused him problems again, and he was very limited. He did see time. He had 5 carries, 6 yards, and so caught 3 passes too. So he was a little bit involved. But that's the thing with him. He seems to try to play through everything, and it's to our detriment as fantasy owners when he does something like that. It would be nice if they just kind of shut him down like they did this week. But I would expect next week for him to be back in the mix. Some of this is going to depend, though. I mean, for a guy like Wilson or a guy like Breida, I mean, what do we know about Breida until he started producing? Not a hell of a lot, because, and that's the nature of the running back position. When someone comes in and delivers, they tend to stay there. So we'll see what happens with Wilson. I think Breida will have a role just based on his speed. He's a very fast player, but Wilson clearly a viable play this week. To me, I see Brad Cruz has him as a sit. I think the thing, and I see what Brad's saying, it's a tough matchup, a tough rushing matchup. I think doesn't matter. I don't think he gets game scripted out because of that receiving ability we saw last week with the 8 catches for 73 yards. I mean, I think he's going to be part of that as well. So that's one of the things I like about him, which brings us to Pittsburgh, where we have Jalen Samuels coming in for James Conner. We expect him to be the first guy in, and he said earlier this week he would start. But we know Stephen Ridley's in the mix. Your confidence level in Samuel's role, how do you feel about that, Emil?
I think they're going to use him. I think they're going to use him a lot. Ridley's been around a while. He didn't do anything last week, but maybe he was, who knows? I don't know what the status was at the time. I kind of like the guy. I think they want to use him. I think they want to exploit his abilities. He did have 3 targets for 3 catches and 20 yards, and one of them was a touchdown. So I'm feeling good about this guy. I think there's good chances. Of course, they're playing the Oakland Raiders, so a lot of things can happen. But I bet they've got a lot of opportunities to score this week. So I'm excited about them.
Yeah, a few things. For me, I mean, Samuel, look, anytime you have this running back situation where it might be a split, you go with the first guy in by default because he gets the first shot to get the hot hand. We also have some evidence over time. Mike Tomlin has been talking him up even before he started working his way into the mix a little more, just saying the arrow's pointing up. So we have James Conner going out, and my guess is Conner's going to be out a little while. They aren't saying what it is, but at first it was contusion, then it was a sprain. Well, it was a sprain. I'm not a doctor, but I could see what part of his ankle he was holding. It wasn't the low part of the ankle. It was the high, the high part of the ankle. So there's reason to be concerned it's a high ankle sprain, and maybe we don't see him again for a few weeks, maybe until the playoffs. So
and since it's week 14, 15, 16, right. If you have a chance to get Samuel, I'm not saying you go out and sell the farm, but this guy may. That's the difference with Wilson right now, as we explained it. Sure. I've got Wilson in one league, and I'm on a bye this week in the playoffs, so I'm probably never going to even use him. Where Samuel, you may be able to get a couple games out of him at least.
Yeah, shelf life is a thing. The same with the Los Angeles backs. At some point Gordon's going to be back, whether it's next Thursday against the Chiefs. Short work, turnaround. So do they get him up to speed, Gordon? With a couple of walkthrough practices, it's very possible. But we'll see about that. But I think the concern, and by the way, talked to a couple beat writers involved with these teams this week, and getting back to San Francisco, asked about Marquise Goodwin to Cam Inman of the San Jose Mercury News today, and he wouldn't. I guess the people in San Francisco kind of know what the personal issues are. Apparently, it's a very sad situation for Goodwin. But now that he's back, does he jump right in and take on his starting role? That's to be determined. It's not necessarily the case, and it's not necessarily that it's been a couple weeks, so it's not necessarily that he just necessarily the case that he'll just come back in and that number one role.
Yeah, you haven't practiced for 2 weeks. You're a little, you lose a little shape. You're emotionally drained.
So
you're right. They may phase him in a little bit.
Right, and so then the other, I talked to Ed Bouchette of the Pittsburgh Tribune or Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He's been covering the Steelers for 1,000 years, almost as long as we've been covering fantasy football. And he had some thoughts on Ridley just being a guy that maybe gets in certain situations, maybe even third down situations, just because he's a good pass protector, or at least a veteran pass protector. And I think that's the concern with Samuel. Is he ready for that every down kind of role, and how much he'll split? Samuel himself said he would come in the first series, then we'd probably see Ridley the second series, and there could be a switch. He kind of implied that. I don't know how much I'm buying into that, because I think, again, if somebody gets the hot hand, you're not going to see the other guy too much, and I think Ridley or Samuel getting the first shot. The thing we like about him, and remember on Yahoo leagues, he is tight end eligible. So if you have great running backs and you want to start them, but you want to play Samuel, you can play him as a tight end in Yahoo leagues and in Yahoo Daily. So that's worth noting as well. I think it's Oakland matchup. I mean, honestly, it's been a struggle for the Steelers when they play Oakland, even under the best conditions. But in this case, it's a 51-point over/under, an implied total for Pittsburgh of 31 points. So lots of offensive production to be had there with Big Ben, even on the road. The road and away, home and away splits haven't been as bad this year as we've seen in the past, so that's not as big a deal. Antonio Brown, good matchup. Juju Smith-Schuster, good matchup. So maybe they throw downfield a little more. If that's the case, maybe we see a little more Ridley. Not enough to scare me off Samuel. I don't want to twist it up here. I'd still be eagerly playing Samuel if given the opportunity. We always looking for guys coming into good situations, and he appears to be. Just keep in mind that Ridley's there. Maybe if you're making DFS decisions, these are the kind of hair-splitting things that are good to know. So let's move on to Denver, where Emmanuel Sanders was lost for the season to a torn Achilles tendon, suffered in practice this week. Bad news for him. You hate seeing this kind of thing, but someone's misfortune is always another man's opportunity. And in this case, we're going to see guys like, Cortland Sutton already firmly ensconced in the mix. So it's not like it's a new thing, but he now takes on the number one role. And then we see Deshaun Hamilton perhaps come in and work the slot a little more. And Tim Patrick is almost also there. How much can we put faith in a guy like Hamilton coming in cold, basically? I mean, a rookie that they have obviously high hopes for. They drafted him, I think, as the eventual replacement for Emmanuel Sanders. But we don't know that he's ready. He's missed some time with knee injury. I think, what do we have here? We have a combined 34 career games for Sutton, Hamilton, and Tim Patrick. Combined 37 receptions for 692 yards and 4 touchdowns. How do you feel about this one?
I don't feel good about Hamilton this week. I think you've got to, if you want to take a shot in tournament daily, makes sense to me. I worry about Sutton, too. He's starting to look pretty good. He's starting to get a feel for things. But now you don't have Emmanuel Sanders, taking double coverage over here. You're going to get double covered. And what's that going to do to him? And I don't think Hamilton's going to help take people away from Sutton. So I'm a little concerned this week about both of them. I mean, I'd probably play Sutton depending on who else I have on my roster. But I think I'm going to have to sit and wait on Hamilton a week and see what happens. But perhaps rostering him in a deep roster, in a deep league where you can roster a guy and sit on him and wait a week because, it's the playoffs here. You never know what happens. Week 15, week 16, you may be able to really use this guy if you got room to sit on him.
They claimed Andre Holmes off waivers from Buffalo. We'll talk about that in a second. But beyond that, it's pretty untested. River Craycraft maybe gets some work in the slot along with Hamilton. We'll maybe shift some outside. Tim Patrick, both of those guys, Patrick and Craycraft, undrafted players promoted from the practice squad. Craycraft 4 game appearances, no catches. So to me, right now, Sutton is the guy you can go with, and I wonder how he'll handle a cagey pass cover like a Richard Sherman. But that's another story. Keenum has been playing better football of late, has reined in the turnovers, so I think that works in their favor. They obviously have a super strong rushing attack with Philip Lindsay lighting up the world like nobody's business. So I think
lacrosse didn't catch a ball. I don't even think he had a target last week.
I don't know that he had a target. He certainly didn't catch a ball. Look, the tight end had been a big part of this offense. Maybe it will return to that. I think it'd be impossible for me to play Lacoste after last week.
You can't play him. You're just wondering now with the loss of, if Hamilton, if Sutton and Hamilton aren't open as well, obviously Lacrosse may be able to help and get some targets and kind of break up the defense a little bit.
I do think that's a reasonable, conclusion to draw, an approach to take in this one. And I think people who took him last week, the recency bias will keep them away from Lacoste, and so maybe makes him a, more of a tournament play in DFS, dirt cheap again. So a lot of these guys in the Denver passing attack, the prices haven't had time to reflect their new roles. So I think that works in their favor as well. So just in general, when you look at this game, we like Jeff Wilson an awful lot. We like Dante Pettis an awful lot. We've got an over-under of 44. The implied total for Denver's 25, for San Francisco 19. So is this a Philip Lindsay game? San Francisco is not the easiest team to rush against, and there are some numbers out there. I know Mike Clay had some pretty interesting numbers about yards after contact, which is not big numbers for Lindsay. Lindsay is way high in yards before contact, meaning he's getting good blocking, but it's a pretty tough matchup for the run. So I'm going to be interested to see. I think this is a bit of a test for Lindsay in this one.
Yeah, you could be right. You get kind of emotionally excited, especially after last week. What a monster game. 2 touchdowns, 157 yards. You only caught 1 ball. Wow, it's just so hard to bench that guy. You're going to have a lot of good players to want to sit that guy. Because
let me just run through the numbers. The yards before contact this season, 4.4, top in the NFL among backs with at least 50 carries. He's averaging only 1.7 yards after contact, which is below the 1.9 yard per carry league average for backs. Overall, Pro Football Focus, Lindsay ranks 44th out of 57 qualified backs in elusive rating, meaning he has forced 23 missed tackles on 179 touches. So, and he doesn't have a big role in the passing game. I thought that's interesting as well. So just some things to think about. Look, you're not benching Philip Lindsay, but you're remembering that Royce Freeman is there, and he's averaging more, quite a bit more after contact. 2.4.
So you never know. He may get a few more carries he may get a few more carries this week. You don't want to predict that per se, but obviously he had 12 carries last week, and Lindsey only had 19. Lindsey just insanely ran all over the place.
Whatever the case is, I mean, that's going to be an issue for the receivers because the Broncos are going to want to be able to take control of this game, use the rushing attack to keep, to take a little pressure off this new receiving core. So
that's
for
a good point.
This week, Sutton is the guy, if you're playing one, for the obvious reasons, the lead guy, the most experience of the rookies in terms of playing time, the most production of them all in terms of that. So he is the obvious play if you need to play one. And otherwise, I think you're right. It's kind of stash and hold on Hamilton and see what he's all about. And we had mentioned the Buffalo situation because I think, it is interesting. Josh Allen, by the way, has been phenomenal. In terms of running the football, it's been pretty amazing. I'll bring up some numbers here. Allen leads all NFL quarterbacks. He's averaging 48.6 yards rushing per game this season. Only 3 quarterbacks since 2001. That's Michael Vick, Russell Wilson, and Robert Griffin III have averaged more rushing yards per game in a season. So he's on track to finish up with those guys. Mike Rodak from ESPN noted he's averaging 7+ rushes per game, the second highest by any quarterback this season behind Cam Newton, who's at about 7.5. So Allen 7.13 carries per game, Cam at 7.5. The only quarterbacks who've averaged more carries per game than Allen in a single season since 2001 have been Newton, Tim Tebow, Vic Griffin, Josh Freeman, Tyrod Taylor, and Russell Wilson. So look, he's still raw, but he's an interesting guy. I think this week the matchup against the Jets, who are aggressive blitzers, may open up some lanes for him to run. But he still throws the football. And
last week he got 135 yards rushing on 9 carries. Right. And he got 231 yards passing. He had 2 interceptions. We had 2 touchdowns. My brain can't calculate that fantasy score, but this guy all of a sudden is a good streaming quarterback who's probably a nice tournament or even a cash DFS play because salary's probably pretty low right now.
Got that high floor, much like Lamar Jackson, just because of the mobility. Look, Pat Mahomes is running well too, and right now he's the leading rusher on the Kansas City Chiefs without Kareem Hunt there. So, but I guess the receiving core is in flux. Kelvin Benjamin released. Andre Holmes, we mentioned, is now in Denver. And so that leaves some younger guys. Zay Jones, we saw, had the 2-touchdown game last week. It's not been great for Zay Jones, right? That's kind of an outlier game, I think it's safe to say. But maybe he gets more going forward. Robert Foster's had a couple of really good games. Had 2 in a row where, over 100 and then I think 94. Then last week, pretty horrible game, 1 catch, 27 yards against Miami. But and Isaiah McKenzie also scored a couple weeks ago. He is questionable this week, so that's worth noting. Could narrow it down a little bit. And by the way, young tight end Jason Kroom, another one of the young receivers listed as doubtful this week, seems unlikely to play. So that kind of distills the receiving core to Zay Jones and Foster. We'll see. Remember as well, LaShawn McCoy had a really good game against the Jets last time they played. Was that what his 119-yard game? I think, if I'm not mistaken, I could look that up.
And and McCoy catches the ball too, so he had 4 for 4, 4 targets, 4 catches last week. Also, Charles Clay did catch 1 ball in the game last week, so maybe if the other tight end is not playing Kroom, maybe he's a sneaky play in some league or some DFS.
Yeah, it was 118 yards and 2 scores from McCoy the last time these 2 teams met. The thing about Zay Jones, has been targeted at least 9 times, twice in the past 3 games. But in between that, he had the 1 target, 1 catch, week 12. Foster as well. It's been kind of spiky for both those guys.
They're going to get more opportunity, with the guys being cut, but they still have low floors, and they're still risky players. But you're looking for things, and here's some change on this team. They cut 2 guys. 2 guys that were playing a lot, and so that's telling me they want to go with these young guys. And they're probably going to get more targets. So maybe one of them is going to do something.
I'm looking at the numbers here, just to get on the record. Allen has produced 85% of the Bills' offense in Miami. So whether it's passing, he has 91 fewer yards rushing than McCoy in 2 fewer games. Has 234 yards rushing over the last 2 games, most of that on scrambles. They do have some design runs. And again, this week going against the Jets, a team that's kind of melting down and that is aggressive, gets aggressive with the blitzing, and that'll maybe open up some lanes for Allen again. So I think he's a very solid play this week, and as you mentioned, is a cheaper DFS option. I should bring up his price just so I can get that out there. But I think, in tournaments we're always playing these crazy guys, and if you read my DFS out this week, you'll see the pricing on Allen this week is, it's $5,500 on DraftKings, $7,400 on FanDuel. So he is very cheap, much cheaper than Dak Prescott, Joe Flacco, who won't be playing, cheaper than a number of guys. So very interesting play there. We'll see if Sam Darnold gets on the field in that game as well. So any last thoughts on that one, Emil?
No, I think we got that one pretty darn good.
All right. Well, there we have it. That's kind of wanted to look at some guys with opportunities this week that we haven't seen much of and kind of sort through what the possibilities are for them. San Francisco, we like Jeff Wilson. We like Dante Pettis. Brad Cruz on the site and his start. Look, Brad Cruz wins a lot of money playing fantasy football, so I don't always argue with him. I just like the clear path to workload because I tend to play opportunities as much as I play the matchup. I think opportunities for me come first, then matchup. And so we like Wilson. We like Dante Pettis in this one. We like in the Chargers. I like Justin Eckler I just combined them. Justin Jackson an awful lot. I think the game script works in his favor. My prediction today on the SiriusXM Football Diehards show was Jackson finishes as a RB1 this week against the lowly Bengals. And just based on the slim vision we got last week. In Pittsburgh, we like Jalen Samuels. We like the opportunity. If you're playing Yahoo, remember he is tight end eligible. For Denver, Cortland Sutton still to play among the wide receivers. A little too soon to rush Deshaun Hamilton into the mix, but he will be someone to watch over the coming weeks. And in Buffalo, we kind of like Josh Allen, no matter who the receivers are, because he runs like a madman. And that's always good for quarterback. Ask Lamar Jackson. It works out well. I want to invite everyone to hit the main page of the site. Tons of great content there for you, including my DFS 3 and out. Brad Cruz, as we've been talking about, his start, the Sunday edition, is always fantastic. Tons of tools, too. Our DFS lineup optimizers, our target data, red zone rushing stats, snap counts, great stuff there. Get Jen Ryan's Week 14 DFS season-long Vegas cheat sheet. It's an Excel file. I live with it. I keep it open on my desktop at all times. Great numbers there and all kinds of information. Tons of information from Armando Marsal and Bobby Gomes, J.J. Buck, Gary Davenport, David Hunter, Matthew Sharon. So lots of good articles up there. Armando and Bobby will be doing their live video on Sunday morning in the hour leading up to the kickoff. If you have the SiriusXM radio, you can catch me and Mike Dempsey every weekday on the Football Diehards show on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern every day. On Saturday, Mike and I are on the Football Diehards show on NFL radio on SiriusXM Channel 88 for 3 hours from, I think it's 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. And you can catch me on Sunday morning with Jeff Mans on the SiriusXM pregame show. Same time you can watch Armando and Bobby. You can catch us all doing our thing. On the site, we'll be having up all the inactives in real time as they're announced, so you can have all your options available to you. So don't miss out. Hit us up. We'll be back again next week to talk more. Emil, any last words before we call it a night?
No, fun stuff. Just keep your head up. Keep looking for these things because this is obviously the critical time, and don't give up. You never know what happens. You work at it. You study what we give you, and you may be able to pull a rabbit out of your hat.
Hey, Armando Marsal won $10,000 a couple weeks ago, so it's
good.
Doable, people.
Beautiful.